now for You Be the Judge. This is a segment of the show where we have a top legal eagle in the UK and a top legal eagle in the US, and we discuss various issues in the news today. Our two judges, as we call them, our two legal eagles, are Joseph Kotrie Monson here in the UK and Mark Schnapp, US lawyer based in Florida in the US. I'm going to kick off with you, Mark. Now, this whole Bombshell election case documentary, Special Counsel Jack Smith has filed this bombshell finding against Trump. Very good timing. Timing's great. Some of the findings: Trump allegedly a plan to declare victory right from the start. This is this whole "I won the election, Joe Biden didn't think." Trump allegedly described claims of voter fraud initially as crazy. He actually said they were crazy at first. Even he thought they were crazy. Mike Pence remains at the center of the case. Smith also detailed Trump's alleged involvement in January the 6th attack. However, it looks like he's going to be able to hold all of that off, doesn't it, Mark?
It certainly does. Judge allowed him to respond, his lawyers to respond, on 2 days after the election. So, and there's no way this would have been decided anyway before the election. And, you know, candidly, Trisha, it looks like he may win. And so if he does win, he may just say, I am immune from prosecution, you know, and so he'll pardon himself, I should say. So, I mean, this is just insane. But the bottom line is right now, his lawyers do not have to respond until 2 days after the election. And as I think I mentioned in an earlier show, that one of my very good friends is representing him in D.C. And he's a very competent lawyer, and pretty much, you know, Trump is being very successful in putting things off to everybody's amazement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, coming to Joseph, I mean, it's slightly different, but when PMs do something slightly, or leaders or would-be leaders do something outrageous, we've got Boris Johnson, and I'll come back to you in a moment, Mark, because this is something that's interesting. But Joseph, coming to you, ex-PM Johnson, you know, this book Boris Johnson's got, he says he planned a raid on a Dutch factory to get COVID vaccines. This is during 2021. He said that the Deputy Chief of Britain's Defence Staff at the time, Lieutenant General Doug Chalmers, had told him a raid using small boats to cross the Channel and navigate Dutch canals would be possible, but warned him of diplomatic repercussions. Would there not be legal repercussions as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Trisha, good evening as always to you, and Mark, good evening to everybody at home and on the move. Boris, he's kind of, I used to say he was the gift that keeps on giving. He's kind of that gift that keeps on keeping on. I'd be interested in respect of both Boris, but also as far as actually our friend over the water, Donald J, are concerned, how many of these cases will continue far into the future in the case of Trump beyond the election. But in respect of this story about Boris, yeah, so basically, this kind of ludicrous painting he creates for us apparently in his book, serialized in the Daily Mail, apparently, if you're so interested. But I've got no doubt that some of these conversations actually did happen. His version goes something like this. He summoned military advisors, peak COVID, peak panic, we all remember, you know, and we were actually quite restrained, weren't we, about criticizing someone making the big decisions, because it's kind of easy to stand on the sidelines, but actually somebody had to carry the can for decisions that could go either way. His version is he summons these military advisors, and he was therefore presented with this plan about a night raid, or I think a clandestine raid. In my mind, it's night because that sounds more fun, and I think he's that kind of immature character. And then he says, having taken that advice from those military advisors, in his big and important Donald Trump voice, he says, I took the view it would be quote unquote nuts. Well, thank you very much, and well done, Boris. I could be just as much saying this about Donald, couldn't I? Those two wacky characters.
Yeah.
None of that makes sense. He didn't need military advisors to tell him. In fact, the idea that he even summoned military advisors to tell him what he knew he would get. Yeah,
I know we talked about legally. Remember we were talking. It's the same case, isn't it? When people say, with boat people, the migrants coming across in boats, take them back. You can't break into somebody else's country to drop off migrants, to steal things or anything like that. There are laws about that. It's
Trisha, it's foreign aggression. It's foreign aggression. It's an act of war. There's no such thing as sneak in, sneak out to a sovereign country. Theft when there's something under civil dispute. And it may well be that the British government had a good case with regard to these vaccines being due to us or whatever. And there are arguments about them getting the correct regulation. And maybe there was some political grandstanding on the EU's from the EU's point of view, not ruling any of that out. But theft at night by your army, that's invasion. If there are boots on the ground, and it's not you. There are circumstances in which in some cases, Trisha, we hear about our boys, the SAS or whatever, storming an embassy to rescue hostages in a rogue nation or whatever. This is the Netherlands. It's 70 miles away. It's not just a member of the EU and an ally. It's a member of NATO. And you know what that means? Obligations of all the other NATO countries, if a NATO member is attacked, is to defend them with force. So the idea that he would even contemplate it, it would be the first time. It would be the first time that boots on the ground since the Second World War on the continent of Europe, British boots on the ground had set foot. Wow, I think even by our friendly blonde buffoon standards, nope.
No, absolutely not. Coming back to you, Mark, as well. I mean, on a serious note, you've got lots of border issues, haven't you, at the moment, and it's being made much of coming up to the election. And there are lots of legals around that too, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the, speaking of buffoon-like proposals, former President Trump has actually proposed an invasion of Mexico. Among other things, using a SEAL team, which is a special operations group, to take out cartel leaders involved in the importation of fentanyl and other illegal drugs. I mean, can you imagine? And he's actually said that he would consider doing that with or without the consent of Mexico. Now, there are historical precedents for special operations in foreign countries, most notably Oliver North, who was aiding the Contras in their fight against the Sandinistas. But this is Mexico. It's on our border. It's the same thing as invading, the Netherlands. I mean, it's just, can you imagine that? A SEAL team going into Mexico? Really? This is a sovereign nation. The same thing. It's a border nation. It's not only illegal. It violates every principle of international law, international sovereignty. It's just incredible that he would even consider doing that. Without the consent of Mexico, or even involving U.S. troops, in a foreign invasion. It's actually not even a military issue. It's a drug issue. So just think about how crazy it is.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I also note that Mexico has taken out, or one of the countries, I can't remember, I think it's Mexico, is taking a huge lawsuit against Smith & Wesson for flooding their country. Half of the illegal weapons on the street have been smuggled from the States into those countries, the very countries that the people like Donald Trump said, they're sending us criminals. Well, you're sending them the guns to enable those criminals. Let's move on. That's a crazy world.
Something, Trisha. there are, gun manufacturers in the U.S. do have immunities. So you're going to really sue a foreign country or allow a foreign country to sue Smith & Wesson? Really, this is so crazy.
It's an increasingly crazy world, isn't it?